I am Brad Keelor. He is Navid Jafari. Next up on Director's Cut, hear the story of the worst field trip he has ever been on. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. For those of you who were afraid that we would stop with episode 150 last week, fear no more. We will continue to bring you an interview with a different Geo-Institute member every single week. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this today, head over to geoinstitute.org. There you will learn so much. The key things that you will find out is that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and/or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, we have been laughing a lot before the interview even started. I feel like it's going to transition over to the viewers too. You should click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Coming to us today from the Red Stick, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he is a faculty member at Louisiana State University. It is Navid Jafari. Navid, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Brad, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
We're going to have a great time today. We have 10 questions, the same way that we do every week, and 2 of them are the same, and we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Yeah, I'm going to use a lot of that 45 seconds to get on you because I watched your Thanksgiving Director's Cut where you got on academics for giving these long answers to what we do. So I will just keep it really short and simple and say that what I'd like to do is inspire students for lifelong learning. And the turnaround question I have for you is, when we as professors look at popular TV shows or movies and there's professors or teachers, we grade those professors and teachers like, are they good or not good? And what I use is the Joseph Lohmann's 2-dimensional model. So think of this as y-axis is your intellectual excitement, like do they know their stuff? Mm-hmm. X-axis would be their interpersonal rapport. Are they like, good going, collegial, easygoing, so forth. So if you're in the top right quadrant, you do both of them really well. You're interpersonal and you know your stuff. And if you know your stuff, but you just don't talk or very cold, you're 0 on the x-axis, but very high on the y-axis. And then if you're at actually origin, then you don't know anything, right? So what I want to point out to you, I can give you a couple of examples to get you going, but I want to see if you can, when we get to the top right, if you can give me what you think would be like an exemplar professor or teacher that you've seen from TVs or movies and things like that.
That's a good one. I didn't expect it to get turned around.
Yeah.
I'm going to rack my brain. You got to tell me first, so I have a little time to think here. But this is good.
Yeah, I'll go through. So at the very bottom corner, at the origin, inadequate. Think of Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the principal, or Jack Black's School of Rock. Let's see, if you go towards the x-axis, increasing, but you're still low on the y-axis. I haven't really watched a lot of Glee, but the teacher in Glee, apparently it kind of fits that mold. And when you get to intellectual authority, so this is, we're getting good now, right? So now it's intellectual authorities, really high on the y-axis, low on the x-axis. My personal one was Professor Snape, Alan Rickman from Harry Potter. He's a really good one. The other one, if you I guess this was a 90s show, Third Rock from the Sun, John Lithgow, physics and everything like that. That was a good one as well. So now you've got people who have good rapport, very good technically, and you have to get to the top right quadrant. Do you have any in mind? I have two in mind.
I've got one right away, actually. You know, I've sat here and thought about it. In my quadrant one, I'm going to skew a little old here. Charlie Moore, head of the class. It was a great 80s sitcom. If you haven't seen it, he's the teacher at a gifted high school in New York City. And he is both able to relate to the kids and, you know, be an intellectual authority at the same time. And descended from his lineage, to go a little younger here, is the great Mr. Feeney on Boy Meets World. I would have to put him right in that same. So now technically both of these were high school teachers and not professors, but I'm still going to go with both of them in that category because I think they fit it really well. I love this. This is a lot of fun. That's
a really good one. So the one that I've always thought about is Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if this also fits, but Frank Oz, who played Yoda in Star Wars.
Perfect.
Yeah.
This is good. Viewers, this is why you watch Director's Cut. This is we didn't even have to get to any of the fun questions to have any fun today.
That's right.
But we are going to ask some fun questions. I mean, just in case people were worried, we're going to kick off with those right now. Navid, what song lyric do you quote the most frequently?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't listen to a lot of the lyrics for songs. I just kind of listen to the tunes. So I'm going to change that up and talk about movies. And the two favorite ones we have in our home is Home Alone 1 and 2. And it's a classic. In fact, this is a perfect time to talk about it because it's, you know, the holiday season. And those are like the holiday movies that you just rerun every day. So in Home Alone, both movies, right, they have this movie within a movie where Kevin is watching like this, I don't know, 1920s or 30s old movie, black and white, and it's almost like a gangster movie or something along those lines, and we just quote that movie around the house, right? And it's not like something that you want to repeat because it's not like it's not like it's kind of filthy, but it's like hilarious. So both, and they weave that movie into the script for both of them, right? When the bad guys are trying to come in, they use that movie for Kevin's voice. It is just the funniest thing, and we quote that wherever we go.
Now, the movie people are going to go crazy if I'm incorrect on this, but I'm going to have to look it up and put it in the show notes, viewers, which will be below where you're watching this now. I think that was not even an actual movie.
That's right. Both of them are made up. That's right. I can confirm that because we looked that up.
That is fantastic. Such a great job. And Home Alone, yes, it is a classic. My 13-year-old daughter is super into it. And if you haven't seen it, everybody, I believe there's a Walmart.com ad with Macaulay Culkin at his current age this year, recreating the whole house. He has a Draymond Green cutout instead of Michael Jordan. It is fantastic. We can link to that as well.
Yeah.
The third question that we put in the interview is always the research question, and you've got a lot for us today. And so everybody should take a seat back and get ready for some information from Navid. You referred to Louisiana when we were talking before we started tape as the coal mine, the canary in the coal mine, at least in terms of hazards and geotechnical challenges. That's all I'm going to say. The floor is yours, and you can go with that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what Louisiana experiences. So it could be anything from big picture wise, hurricanes, and the last 3 years has been just dramatic. We've had, I think, 4 major hurricanes make landfall in 2020, and then you had Ida in 2021. So hurricanes are a big thing. They're intensifying. Sea level rise is a big thing. Subsidence is a big thing in Louisiana. And just the fact that we have climate change happening, things are changing around. Like this year, we had a big drought, and that really affected infrastructure. So the big question we want to answer is, how do we protect our coast? And Louisiana's coast is significantly different from other states. And what I mean by that is, if you go to the East Coast or you go to Florida, it's very much a tourist destination, right? There's resorts, there's beaches. But Louisiana is a working coast. So when you go down to the coast, there's shipyards, there's petrochemical plants, there's pipelines, there's all this industry because it's a working coast. And so how do you protect all that infrastructure, not just the communities? Historically, we've done a really good job with levees, flood walls. Everyone thinks of New Orleans after Katrina and how we spent $14.5 billion protecting that city and the surrounding areas. And it's crazy, $14.5 billion. And that's already almost 10 years old. I mean, you start thinking about Houston's going to need something, Miami's going to need something. You start going up the East Coast, how many billions of dollars are we going to spend on coastal protection? So where we come in is Louisiana said, well, it's not just about the levees and the flood walls. We need multiple lines of defense. We need to have the barrier islands provide storm surge protection. We need to have the marshes and the swamps provide protection so that by the time you get to the levees, you have attenuation of those forcings already. And that way you don't have to build or maintain your infrastructure to the heights that we have. And if you go to New Orleans, you can see these massive structures that we have to keep up with, and there's going to be a big cost. So that I want to talk about is natural infrastructure. Something that's big is green infrastructure, natural infrastructure. It goes by a lot of names. And how can we use wetlands, barrier islands, dunes, and beaches and swamps to provide protection? There's a lot of geotechnical questions that come in. And I think what's really fascinating is the geology behind it, right? We're geotechnical engineers. So we go from the outer continental shelf, what's happening in the Delta front, to what's happening in the Mississippi River Delta. People don't realize that Louisiana is a delta. It's made by the Mississippi River, all of it. Anything from Interstate 10 and 12 South is made by the Mississippi River in the past 10,000 years. And then you have the Mississippi River itself. So how do you have navigation and flood control along the Mississippi River? And what that means is, as a geotechnical engineer, I don't deal with I deal with individual, let's say, infrastructure projects, but we deal with landscape processes because our coast is dynamic. It's changing. We're having land loss. We're having land growth. We're having all these hurricanes change things. So what we do is on a landscape scale, and that's just so mind-boggling for me. So geotechnical engineer working on landscape processes like a geomorphologist or a marine geologist.
So I want to ask about something that happened after Katrina.
Yeah.
There was this press conference. Trent Lott, former senator from Mississippi, had a lot of damage to one of I think his homes. It was near the coast in Mississippi. And there's this big press conference. President Bush is there and says, gets his really determined, I am president, we're going to fight back face on, and says, we're going to rebuild your house, Trent. And I remember at the time thinking, that doesn't seem like a very smart thing to do. How do we as a community develop some kind of, I think it's probably more complex than a rubric, but where we can make an educated decision that, yes, it is worth replacing this infrastructure, whatever it is, or no, it's time to let that go? Where do we start?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if you have to divide it into two. One is for communities and people, and one is for the actual industries. Because the industries have to be in Louisiana. It's a working coastline. Shipyards to the energy sector, they need infrastructure on the coast. And one of the things that they're dealing with, all their plants, like you have to have people for your plants. But if their people can't live on the coast, then you have a bigger issue. And I think there needs to be a rubric. A lot of times you think about cost benefit analyses to see if we need to do this infrastructure project. And I think that's a big question that needs to be answered, of how do we create a rubric that's equitable as well. It's not just driven towards industry or driven towards areas where, because it's already well built up, it has a lot of cost benefit ratio that, it's going to get all the funds. So that is a huge question that we're dealing with right now. And in Louisiana, one big question as well, that it's a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the country, is insurance rates. My own home insurance has gone up. I'm trying to think of numbers. I think almost double since when I bought my home in 2019. So in about a span of 4 years, it's doubled. And that's just because of all the hurricanes we've had, the damages. And you think about or you hear about what's happening on the West Coast in California, like all the major insurance companies are pulling out because of wildfires. I think that is a big question that needs to also be answered moving forward. How are we going to insure our properties?
Oh, that's a great answer. And we could probably, this is one of those ones that we could talk about for 10 hours on its own.
Yeah.
We're going to have some more fun now.
Okay.
You're going right from that, incredibly light topic of hazard mitigation and insurance and all of that stuff. We're going to make you think back. We do nostalgia well on Director's Cut. At least we like to think we do. And so we ask questions like this. What do you miss the most about your first car?
Yeah, I'm going to say my first two cars because they are in fact the same car. And because you know how like manufacturers make the same car for a couple of years. And so my first car was a 1999 Honda Accord Coupe, V6 and V6 Coupe. And so that 99 was the first year they made it. And I had that model for a couple of years. And then I switched to 2003 because I liked it so much. So like the first year and the last year that they made it. And I loved it. It's like, if I had to say like the V6 engine was awesome. Like, it's great to have a coupe. I drove it back and forth from Memphis to Illinois. They don't usually do that anymore. Usually that same kind of car has a 4-cylinder engine that's a bit more efficient, but kind of gets the same power. It's not the same. But what I really, really loved about the car was its color. And it's a color that manufacturers really don't make anymore. It was a dark green. And I don't know how best to explain it. Like Toyota would use this green color a lot in the 90s and early 2000s. It's like this rich, dark green. And maybe the best way I can explain it is if someone likes Formula One or racing, and you go to Europe, a lot of these countries have national colors, racing colors. And for England or UK or Britain, I guess, is you have this British racing green. It's like a dark, rich green, I keep saying. And it is a beautiful green. And it's like when you think of like the E-Type Jag, the green it would come in, that's the green that I'm talking about. You just don't see that anymore. That's what I really, really miss about that car, that beautiful green.
And that color did. I don't know when it disappeared, but I'm going to say probably in the late 2000s because it was everywhere. My sister had a Saturn in that color. I know there were a lot of Subarus in that dark green. Yeah. So it's kind of.
And everything now is like what? White to silver to black. It's just very generic.
When we were driving to my parents for Thanksgiving on Thursday, my wife said to me, "I never thought I'd be driving a white car, but here we are." And in many ways, that's all of us. Here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I try to mix in the work questions here, but we can make them fun too, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about your lab. And Navid, what would you say is the most unusual thing to ever happen in your lab?
I never thought when I got to Louisiana, I was doing a lot of levees and flood walls in grad school. And when I got to Louisiana, I was like, great, I've got all of the levees in the world here, whether it's along the Mississippi River in Katrina or in New Orleans and elsewhere to study. But we've been building levees for 100 years. Like, we can do them. And what was really a new area was this natural infrastructure. How do we design natural infrastructure? And so one of those is marshes. And you start talking to ecologists, which is crazy, systems ecologists. And they're like, yeah, we really need to know the shear strength of marshes. And you're like, what? Really? And so they had been using they're not geotechnical engineers. So they kind of Google, okay, we're going to use a Tor vane or a handheld vane shear to do shear strength. And I was like, well, actually, you kind of want to use a cone penetrometer to measure its shear strength. It gives you a continuous profile. It measures a lot of things. You can do a lot of data mining with it. So I never thought I would be doing cone penetrometer tests in marshes. And we push it by hand. So we have like a Vertec cone that we just push because it's really, really soft. It's a marsh. And you can push it through the marsh, usually about 1 to 2 meters. Or I guess 6 feet or something, I guess in English units. And and you kind of evaluate the strength of the marsh, because marshes have different salinities, they have different vegetation types, they have different elevations. All of those are going to affect what strength you get. And that's what's really fascinating about that. You kind of bring in the biology in a different way into geotechnical engineering. How do you design with biology? So we're doing a lot of field work in Louisiana, and we've started to expand to Florida and the Everglades, to all the way up the East Coast to Plum Island, which is north of Boston. But one story really sticks out, and that's one of my projects in Southwest Louisiana. It's in the Sabine, or it was in the Sabine National Wildlife Refuge. And to give some geographic background, this is if you're driving from Baton Rouge to Houston and you're about to get to the Texas border, that's kind of the Sabine River is the border between Texas and Louisiana. And then Lake Charles is about 30 miles to the east on the Calcasieu Pass, or Lake Calcasieu Lake. So Sabine is just south or west of the pass, south of Lake Charles. And this was the worst part of it, is just everything kept breaking down. Like when you do field work, it's really tough. Doing field work in geotechnical engineering is always tough. Doing field work in general is tough. Doing field work on the coast is another level. It's like an order of magnitude, because now you have to deal with water, you have to deal with hazards. And so we show up and we've set up sites. What's unique about the site itself is there's been a lot of restoration in the past 40 to 50 years. So we have test beds to see how marshes are going to behave once they're restored in the next 50 years. So we're going to go do our testing there. Our first couple of sites are on the Calcasieu Pass itself. And so we get out there and the boat breaks down in the middle of the pass. So we managed to get to the shoreline where we were supposed to do our field work. And we were lucky. We were working with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we had a contact in the New Orleans office who was helping us out. And luckily, he had his guys looking out for us, because we were supposed to be out there doing work. So they found us stranded on the marsh and towed us back to the marina. That was the first day. And afterwards, later on, I heard he was really scared for us, because the Calcasieu Ship Channel is one of those major navigation channels that, major ocean liners go up to for energy and so forth. So when those big boats come in, they usually create 4 to 6 foot wakes because they're so huge. And so it's happened where people are either fishing or driving next to these huge ships, that the wake picks them up and literally throws them onto the marsh. And so we were lucky that didn't happen when we were out there. That was the first day. The second day we get out there, and we didn't have the right boat. The water levels were really low, and we had like a typical whole boat, so we just couldn't get in very low water, which meant that one of our sites was really kind of far away. We had to walk, or I sent the students, because we had to basically say, what is the least amount of people that we need to be taking there to get the work done. They had to march through probably a couple 100 yards of marsh to get to where we wanted to test. And the mosquitoes are awful. It's hot. It's Louisiana. That was day 2. Day 3, the trailer for the boat, the tire was about to bust, so they had to get that changed. So we didn't get started till late in the day. But we had the right boat, so we got to get to do some work. So we did 3 days of field work, but we didn't finish the work. We had to come back in 2 months. This was in October. We had to come back in December to finish it up and get a couple of elevations in some of the marshes. And the last place that we went to was on the Calcasieu Ship Channel again, the first sites where we got stranded. And we finished at about 4:30. And it's December. It's starting to get dark. It's like, all right, we're in the boat. Let's get out of here. Let's get to the marina. Engine doesn't turn over. So we're stuck. We're like, we can't figure it out. We're stuck. In and around the Calcasieu Ship Channel, it's getting dark. It's December, and at some point we try to troubleshoot. It's not working. I called the local sheriff. I was like, hey, we're stranded. We're gonna need to get rescued. And they're like, yeah, we don't know where you are. And I'm like, how can you not know where I'm in your territory? Like, come pick us up. So we continue to troubleshoot, and we had an inverter with us. So we connect the inverter we disconnect the battery to the engine. We connect to the inverter, and that worked for like 30 seconds. And it got us going a little bit. but we're still probably 30 minutes away from the marina. We're like deep into the ship channel towards the Gulf of Mexico. So our cone penetrometer uses a 12-volt marina battery to power itself. We took our cone penetrometer battery, connected it to the engine, and it worked.
Whoa.
So what saved us was our cone penetrometer. And we managed to get back about 6:30 or something, 7 back to the marina, and safely, I might add. So that was my worst field project ever.
That is amazing. What a great story, though. And I feel like somewhere, does Paul Main know this story? Because it seems like this is perfect for him. He would tell people that cone penetrometers will save their lives anyway. But it literally actually saved you guys from being stuck out there and probably getting run into by a freight vessel. So
that's right. Cargo ship. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a really good story. And that's one of those tales that I feel like could only happen down there. Get a little more about Louisiana here in a minute. The first thing we have to ask you is the second question that we ask everybody when they come on Director's Cut, and that's, how did you first get involved with ASCE and GI?
That's a great story because it goes back to when Jean-Louis Briot was the GI president. I think it was 2008 to 2009.
Sounds right.
Right, and Jean-Louis has always been huge on students, getting students involved, and one of his big contributions that year was to get a student presidential group started, to get students from around the country together. How do we get students more involved in the GI? And because if you get more students involved, then that's going to basically keep growing into the GI membership down the line. And I was a sophomore at the University of Memphis when like this email went out, hey, we're looking for nominations for students to serve on this SPG, student presidential group. And I already knew I wanted to be a geotechnical engineer. I was working with David Ariano, who is a geotechnical professor at University of Memphis, also a Tim Stark student. So there's a lineage there. So like, hey, do you want to do this or you want to apply? I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, I think they were asking for grad students, but why not? So it comes to when, I guess, afterwards, Jean-Louis was like, yeah, we just took everybody who applied. There was like 22 of us. I was like, I thought I was special that I got in. But when some of the names I'll drop here is Jennifer Nix and Mike McGuire. Some of those, 2 of those names actually are still really involved in the GI. And so they brought grad students from all of like the major geotechnical programs at that time. This is, oh my gosh, like 15 years ago, I think. So I was part of that. That's how I first, and I got to go to Orlando that year, just to kind of, I made sure I made it just for the committee meeting, that one day, just to kind of show myself and everything like that. Today, the Student Presidential Group as the Student Leadership Council, the SLC. And now they have GSOs, graduate student organizations all over the country. And it's grown to something so big and beautiful for the GI, I think, that other institutes are trying to replicate. And so if you keep going my story, I get to Illinois for grad school, and the student presidential group kind of dies down after Jean-Louis ends his 1-year term. But around 2010, 2011, my first year at Illinois, it comes back as the Student Leadership Council. And so I was there. Some of the other names I'll drop is Stacy. It was Stacy Tucker, but I think it was Stacy Kalu. I'm going to mess up her name. Stacy Kalus.
Kaleza. Yeah.
Kaleza. Thank you. She's going to probably get on me now. Who's at Texas State now. Menzer, who is the most famous of all of us. Bina was there, and my colleague here at LSU, Thomas Lynn, we're all part of that SLC. And so it was, it brought a cohort of geotechs together. And I think you can probably track the people who are part of the SLC, whether it's in industry and academia. It's like, it's a growing movement. And my personal contribution there is I started up the GeoLegends article. And with the first person that we did, I made sure it was us at Illinois, and we did Clyde Baker. So I got to meet him in 2011.
That's a great story. I always wonder about asking this question to everybody, because a lot of the time it's, well, I went to the student chapter meetings because there was free pizza. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But every now and then you get a super story. That the Thanksgiving one, we had a Geo-Congress couple, and then Navid, you give us this gem. So that is fantastic. Thank you for walking us through that whole story. Have to ask one more Louisiana question, this one specific to Baton Rouge. And it's because we asked Jack Cadigan this question when he was on and Jasmine BK when she was on. Navid, where are you most frequently on football Saturdays in Baton Rouge?
Yeah. So in something like this, I need to give a relative comparison. And I'll give Illinois as that one's Big Ten country. And in Big Ten country, most of the games are early in the day, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, noon Eastern is typical time period for those Big Ten games. And the stadium is on the south end of the campus. Newmark Lab is on the north end of campus. And you could really go through your day on a Saturday and not notice that there's a football game going on at Illinois. Part of that is it's Illinois football. Part of it is it's kind of farther away and so forth. So in grad school, it was always about, I'm in the office on Saturday, getting work done, no matter what. Then you get to the South and it's SEC country, right? It's Saturday night in Death Valley, right? And it's another thing, like RVs, they kick us out of the parking lots at LSU Friday at 6 p.m. so all the RVs can come tailgate. And so from Thursday, you can start setting up like where your tent is. You can claim your land for your tent and so forth. It's just another level here in the South when it comes to the tailgating. And so you get through Friday, bunch of RVs. There's a lot of tailgating the whole day. And then the whole thing about LSU is night games. It's Saturday night. It's all about night games. Like we hate this past weekend, we had the game against Texas A&M at like 11 a.m. And half the stadium's empty because like they're just getting their day started. So what that means is like you can't access the campus on game day. Like they shut everything down. Everything's locked up except for the grad students who want to go and get their tests running and so forth. So I personally stay away from campus. And it's a really boring day for me. I try to get home stuff. And one of the big things is, for those of you who don't realize, the LSU campus literally is adjacent to the Mississippi River. So you have 100,000 people inside the stadium, and you have probably 100,000 people just tailgating who are not going to the game, just kind of there to party. How do you get 200,000 people to leave after a game? The traffic is a nightmare. And what the solution has been is contraflow. So any road leaving the campus is outbound going. And if you live in the neighborhoods around campus and you're not in before that contraflow, then you're out until like midnight or 1 a.m. So we make it a point to kind of do our grocery shopping, do stuff around the house, and just stay put. So that way we don't ever get caught by contraflow. Because the story, it's not my story, it's my wife's story. I'd like to say it because she works at a hospital, local hospital, as a pharmacist. The year we won, no, I think it was the year before we went. No, the year we won the national championship in 2019. It's Florida, right? So it's a big game. No one's leaving early. If for LSU, if we're winning big, people start leaving at halftime or the third quarter. It's like, all right, well, we're one. I don't want to deal with the traffic. That's why when you look at the stadium's half empty. So the game ends at 10:30. She gets off her shift, and she's like, well, how do I get home? I'm like, well, I guess you could take this road, and she tries it, and it's blocked off. It's contraflow. We'll try this road, blocked off. So she's like, that's it. I'm just going to sit here at a Walgreens parking lot until 1 a.m. That's what I'm saying. Until she could come home that night. And she was like, this is the worst thing ever. I'm never working night shifts on game day. So that's the story with LSU football on Saturdays, and you stay home.
Oh, I like that a lot, though. We are going to go back to Illinois for the next question.
Yeah.
Ask you about your advisor from grad school, Tim Stark. Tim is, I'll just say, about 130% personality. I mean, obviously there's a lot of substance there, but we love working with Tim just because of the emotions that he brings. Do you have a great Tim Stark story from your time at Illinois?
Yeah, I have a lot. I think the first thing you need to know is with Tim, when you're his grad student, it's a way of life that he teaches you. Like it's a way of life, and one of them is his travel. He always uses Southwest. He's a big Southwest guy. So you're like, okay, you're a big Southwest person then. He's a big Hyatt guy. All right, you're a big Hyatt guy. He's a big Panera guy. You're a big Panera guy. And he's a huge Cheers fan. But if you just, he would walk into our offices and give Normisms. Um, and I don't know, I guess you have to go back to the older generations who watched Cheers. And every time the show starts, Norm walks into the bar and everyone in the bar says, Norm. And then, the barkeep, whether it's Sam or Coach or, gosh, I forgot the third guy. It was, I should know this.
Yeah, you're on your own there. Tim's
Yeah.
gonna see this,
Yeah, he is. Well, they were like, well, what do you want to drink? And he's like, well, beer. But along the way, he would give these funny quotes of like, yeah, I missed the on-ramp to the fast lane today. Or, just all these jokes. And so Tim would come to our offices and just give Normisms, like, as motivational speak, And so that's always been great. But the one that's really like touching is I was about to go to Baton Rouge for my interview for LSU, and Tim was out out of town in the lead up to that. And so he comes back for teaching on Thursday, and I get some time with him, which is good. And I give him like my seminar speak, and as a typical advisor, he's kind of like, okay, cut this, cut this, cut that. And when you're left with it, it's like not much is left. And it's like Thursday, I'm leaving Sunday, I got to go back to the drawing board. And the specific project is, or what I wanted to speak about was Hurricane Katrina and the Inner Harbor Navigational Canal floodwall breaches at the Lower Ninth Ward. It was a project that I essentially became my master's project. And we had a couple of publications at that point. And one of the things you have to understand is your audience. These are people who lived through Katrina. And I spent a good portion of the presentation. Well, here's Katrina, here's the track, here's the surge and waves. And it's like, look, these people know that. Get to the substance. So back to the drawing board. And when we started talking about logistics, because the way of life of Tim is, what are your logistics, And so I was like, yeah, I'm leaving Midway Airport Sunday morning. He's like, oh, yeah, well, this was January. It was like LSU did this interview very early on in the interview stage. If you think about academic hiring, it was the weekend before TRB. So a lot of the transportation faculty were gone in any case. So I was like, yeah, I got to go to TRB Sunday morning. Why don't we carpool? Why don't you drive me up to Chicago? And my flight's 45 minutes or so after yours. So I was like, okay, cool. Sunday morning at like 6 or 6:30, I show up to his home. He comes by the driver's seat and he's like, hey, let me drive and you practice while we're driving up there for 2.5 hours so we can work on your seminar and make sure it's airtight. He loves using the word airtight. That's one of his things. And so it was great. Like for the next 2.5 hours, we're walking through the seminar, memorizing the first 8 slides. So if anything happens, I've got it down. And basically shows me, okay, park here. He's like, with Tim, it's like, because it's like, he does this so much. He's like, all right, we're going to go to the parking garage. You're going to park on the 5th level because you always want to be on the 5th level because that's like the pass to get to the airport, the boardwalk. And then you always want to park in J so you can remember it. Like he's teaching you all these little small details to like take it out so you're not overthinking things. And then basically walks me to my gate and was like, all right, good luck. And it was really cool that he did that for me.
That's amazing. Well, all that's amazing, but what a great story.
Yeah.
I am confident he will watch this and be proud.
I think so.
We have two questions left. The next one I thought hard about putting in here or not, because, I think the community, meaning the civil and the geotechnical community, really sees itself, fancies itself as being all over natural hazards and extreme events. But there are always topics that are hotter than others. Maybe there was a major event somewhere in the world and it leads everybody to focus on tsunamis or, floods or whatever it is for a while. What aspect of extreme events doesn't get enough attention, in your opinion, in the civil or geotechnical community?
You can't do this for all extreme events, but you can for a lot of the water ones. And I'm going to use hurricanes as an example. With hurricanes, you can do pre-deployments. A lot of the extreme events that geotechnical engineers or civil engineers do is after the event happens, let's go see what happens, post-event reconnaissance. But with hurricanes, you can do pre-deployments, meaning that you can look at the track of a hurricane and kind of guesstimate where it's going and develop science questions that you want to investigate by deploying sensors or collecting pre-storm data and then going after the storm and comparing, right? So the example I give is Hurricane Laura in 2020. This is the first one that we really did as a research group, and we did it successfully. So Hurricane Laura is barreling towards the Louisiana coast, and it's honing in on kind of Lake Charles. And if you read the press releases, they're like, this is the big one, this is the end of the world, and so forth. The wind speeds were like over 100 miles per hour. I think it was 120 when it was all said and done. And we look at the southwest coast of Louisiana. We're like, Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, Rockefeller being, John D. Rockefeller. That's where its history comes from. They have a really cool setup where they have breakwaters and they have a natural shoreline. And you can set up a really cool experiment where you look at a natural shoreline with wetlands and a modern day beach, and then one with a breakwater in front of it. And we deployed wave gauges offshore and in transects in front and behind the breakwaters to see how things change. You measure the hydrodynamic loading. We measured RTK elevations. We collected initial pre-samples. So you can do this pre-deployment because when you go back, it looks nothing like it is before, right? It's very drastic. Hurricanes cause immense landscape changes. But you have the loading now. You have the surge and waves to piece back what the story is. And for Laura, the peak surge and waves were right at Rockefeller. Like couldn't have happened any better that we put our sensors right where it needed to be. And what was lucky about Laura is it was switching back and forth between the pass. It was either on the west side of the pass or the east side of the pass. If it's on the west side of the pass, that's bad news, because then the surge, the whole surge is on the east side of the eye. All that surge is going up the Calcasieu Pass into Lake Charles. At the last second, it flipped to the east side of the pass, so Lake Charles just got the wind impact. Then Hurricane Delta comes 6 weeks later. It's like, oh my gosh, like not again, please no. And after a while, Jack was part of this as well, Jack Cadigan. You get tired of doing these things because hurricane after hurricane, we had 6 hurricanes, I think, that year. So we go and pre-deploy for Hurricane Delta, and the forecast having it hit Terrebonne Bay, which is south of Houma. And Houma is kind of between Lafayette and Baton Rouge, just south, like in the middle, but really south. So we go and deploy our sensors. One of the things with pre-deployments is you have to get in there before the hurricanes or the tropical storm winds arrive, because then the waves pick up. You just can't get to the coast. And that's usually about 24 hours before the actual hurricane comes. So you have about a 24-hour period before those winds come that you have an idea where the hurricane's going. You just got to get out there and do it. And we do that. We put the sensors out there. And by the time we were driving back home that day, Hurricane Delta had switched its trajectory and was going right back to Rockefeller. So it was going up the center of the coast, and it was now veering west towards Calcasieu Pass again in Rockefeller. And so we all just felt really bad, because the whole point of a pre-deployment is there's wins and losses. We had a win with Laura, our sensors are not going to be collecting anything in Terrebonne because they're there and they're not at Rockefeller. So that's one of the things I think as geotechnical engineers that would be really good that we can take advantage of is doing pre-deployments to collect data about geotechnical infrastructure before it happens. And I think a lot of our research and industry would be much better off for that. And then on a practical note, I've lived through in the past 3 years a lot of hurricanes. And it's really taxing socially, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And these are taxing events. And I think what gets lost is the recovery process from hurricanes. And I think we need to start designing our infrastructure to expedite that recovery process, make it a quicker turnaround. I think a lot of times we talk about resilience. And I think something that we also need to consider is our infrastructure is part of a huger web of systems. You know, infrastructure itself could be a system, but it's part of a larger system. So this concept of systems thinking is something that we need to think bigger about, and how we plug into the larger infrastructure question for our communities and the coasts and through extreme events.
Oh, very cool. I like that a lot. And you gave me a good one. I really wasn't sure what you were going to go with there, but that was fantastic. And a couple of good hurricane stories there too, as well.
Yeah.
We saved a biggie for the end. At this point, we have announced it only last Friday that you are the 2024 Casagrande Professional Development Award winner. So congratulations to you, Navid. I have to ask you, what's the best part about being the Casagrande Award winner for 2024?
Yeah, it's really great because it's recognition from your peers. That's always great to see. And it's recognition for the state of Louisiana and LSU and our department. I think that's the biggest thing, is the recognition. And for the students who are really part of this research group, we're a great group. I don't, talk really about my group, it's our group. And I've just been blessed with brilliant students. And it's also for them. They've been part of this. Some of the students you've interviewed for Director's Cut, some of you haven't, but they've just been big players. My success is really their success, and that's a big thing for me. And it's just great to receive that and be part of a long list of great folks who've received the award.
I think that is always, well, I feel like I bring this up a lot, but when you go and you look at the list of the people who received these things before you, I talked about it with Peg Agasemi a few weeks ago with the Collingwood Prize. That one goes back to like 1895, and you're just like, yeah. Whoa. But then the other part is, even though it's been given out a long time, there are only, I can't even remember in terms of the Casagrande Award, how many winners there are. That's a really select group. So
yeah, it goes back to the early 90s. And I remember that because I was looking down the list with my wife, and I was like, yeah, look, see. And then because Tim Stark's 1992, she's like, oh wow, Tim got it too. And because the first person I shared the news with is first my wife and then Tim. And because when you share it with your wife, she's like reading through it. You're like, all right, so where's the cash prize? But she's been great, and a lot of my success is due to her as well.
That's fantastic, and we'll have to make sure we get a great shot with you and Tim together when we're in Vancouver when you receive the award. So for all of our viewers out there, Navid will receive the Casagrande Award officially in Vancouver at Geo-Congress 2024 in just a couple of months. So you made it through all 10 questions. You did a great job. We got some great Louisiana stories. We found out about dark green cars that you love. For those with kids, Nigel Gearsley in the Cars franchise, the British car was in that British Racing Green. If you liked what you saw today, and you're here at the end, so you probably did, again, click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every single time we post something to the YouTube channel. Navid, thank you for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a great time. I love watching the director's cuts. Keep them coming.
Every week, every Wednesday, except during the summer and 1 week at the holidays. Other than that, I'm on it. And for all of our viewers, we've got 2 Director's Cut episodes left for calendar year 2023. They will both be holiday themed, so you've got something to look forward to there. And we will see you with a brand new episode of Director's Cut next week.
Cheers. Like, I fly Southwest because Tim flies Southwest. I stay at Hyatt hotels because Tim stays at Hyatt. And we're big Panera friends. He got me hooked on Panera.
So there's like a Tim Stark Bible.
Yeah.
Wow.